DW, are you all right?
F you, DW.
Gone! I left another thing and it's gone! Life is so unfair.
And I say, hey!
Arthur Reed is building a model airplane because it's 1999 and Minecraft won't be a thing for 10 years. DW sees this as a golden opportunity to pester the crap out of her brother. Over the next several days, DW makes Arthur's life a living hell as he spends God knows how many hours perfecting the one possession his little sister has yet to ruin. Finally, the model is finished, and Arthur makes the foolish mistake of letting it out of his sight. Because the instant DW has the chance, she throws it out the goddamn window. When it breaks, DW impulsively blames Arthur for making a shitty plane, which is like blaming Caesar for not having knife-proof skin. DW continues to taunt her brother as he weeps over the shattered remains of his painstaking efforts, leading to one of the most cathartic moments in television history.
It's not my fault if you made a plane that can't fly.
I told you not to touch it!
DW runs crying to her mom like the snitch she is. The Reed parents are Team DW, as they instantly take side without even asking her how the model broke in the first place.
How did it happen? Did you not see it? Were you fucking with it?
DW continues to play the victim as she hurls one final insult at her brother.
You're bad.
What a bitch. Arthur's parents ground his ass. They promise that DW will also be punished, which we never see carried out. The next day at school, Buster is somehow surprised that Arthur would take a swing at his sister, when just a few days ago, he said this.
I never thought about it before, but being an only child is nice.
Binky and his band of bullies overhear what happened, leading to the revelation that Binky has never actually hit anyone. The bullies order Binky to kick the crap out of Arthur, otherwise he'll be kicked out of their club. In class, we see Arthur's friends are also for Team DW, as if none of them have spent 5 minutes with the 4-year-old Hellspawn. Meanwhile, Binky goes to scrupulous lengths to avoid Arthur, even though he could just lie to the other bullies and say he punched him at any time. But whatever, we gotta fill 11 minutes somehow. That afternoon, Binky walks home with the other bullies when, surprise, surprise, Arthur shows up. Backed into a corner, Binky the bulldog punches Arthur and then runs away like a thoroughbred pussy. Arthur's parents have no sympathy for their son who, unlike DW, got his ass kicked for no good reason. Instead of calling the school to have Binky expelled, they gaslight Arthur into believing this was a teachable moment. Blow me. Drinking his parents' Kool-Aid, Arthur gives DW an unearned apology. In return, she gives him a half-assed apology and even then manages to fuck it the fuck up.
But what kind of a stupid plane doesn't fly?
A model plane?
Well, I didn't know. I'm just a child. Give me a break.
What a bitch. The next day, we see Binky racked with guilt over what he did. Lucky for him, Arthur is now thoroughly brainwashed and thanks Binky for beating the shit out of him. Let's review. DW repeatedly messed with Arthur's model plane despite being asked several times to leave it alone. When she threw the model out the window, she tried to make Arthur think it was his fault that it broke. After pushing the plane and her brother over the edge, she instantly played the victim and was never punished for what she did. When Arthur got a far worse beatdown, she just stood there and grinned like a goddamn psychopath. And even after Arthur apologized for hitting her, she still refused to accept responsibility for her actions. F you, DW.
And I say, hey!
It's baby Kate's first birthday, and the Reed house is throwing a weak-ass party. DW brags that Kate is her favorite sibling. Arthur calls BS. He reminds DW that she's treated Kate like crap since the day she was born. Flashbacks ensue. The Reed parents return from the hospital with baby Kate, and the first thing DW does is scream in her ear.
Let me see. Let me see. Let me see.
DW refuses to let the baby out of her sight, going so far as to listen to her breathe while she sleeps.
Inhale. Exhale.
What the fuck? DW tries to give baby Kate a bath. Luckily, her father's seen The Good Son enough times to nix that shit on the spot.
Hey, Mark. Don't fuck with me.
DW is convinced her parents don't know what the hell they're doing. Mrs. Reed leaves the baby alone with DW, proving she doesn't know what the hell she's doing. Kate drops her binky, and DW immediately makes things worse. Kate is now crying, but DW refuses to let anyone console her, because she'd rather let her baby sister suffer than let anyone else take credit for saving the day. DW continues to make things worse. Arthur remains level-headed, and manages to calm down his baby sister. Everyone praises Arthur for his nurturing instinct, while DW's ego suffers a major blow. The Reed parents move Kate's crib into DW's room, proving once again neither of them know what the hell they're doing. DW is thrilled, until she discovers that babies spend most of their time crying and shitting. Now she's losing sleep, and all of her toys smell like baby ass. Huh, maybe it wasn't the best idea to have a newborn and a 4-year-old share the same bedroom. Kate's crying causes DW to lose more sleep, driving her batshit insane. DW conspires with the Tibble twins to get rid of baby Kate. The Tibbles tell her to blame Kate for various accidents, in the hopes her parents will stop loving their own baby. Lucky for Kate, DW is terrible at the blame game.
How did my new shoes get in the dishwasher?
Kate did it. I saw her.
He sees right through her BS and grounds her lying ass on the spot. The next day, at a garage sale, DW attempts to sell baby Kate to her neighbor for 50 cents.
Okay, 35 cents, but it's my final offer.
The neighbor snitches on DW's scheme. DW rushes to hide the evidence. Realizing she can't get rid of baby Kate, DW decides to run away, the first sensible decision she's made in her entire life. She goes to Grandma Thora's house and guilts her into driving to the nearest island. Grandma Thora indulges her granddaughter's delusional fantasy, as she's eager to be rid of the pretentious preschooler. She drives DW to the waterfront, rents a boat, and rows her out to the island, while DW never lifts a goddamn finger. For some absurd reason, Grandma Thora tries to talk DW out of running away. She reminds DW that Kate will need someone to look up to as she gets older. DW assumes she's talking about her. With her ego now thoroughly stroked, DW rushes home and vows to groom Kate in her image. Let's review. DW spent several weeks stalking her newborn sister's every move. When Kate got upset, DW made it worse by trying to play the hero. When DW finally got what she wanted, she screamed raw deal the second she realized living with a baby isn't all peaches and cream. She then tried to get rid of Kate by blaming her for stupid shit and trying to sell her for pocket change. When all of that failed, she emotionally manipulated her grandma into helping her run away. And it was only when she realized the baby might grow up without her corrupting influence that she returned home to ensure Kate grows up to be a narcissistic sociopath. Just like her. F you, DW. Arthur is worried DW is becoming a psychopath, as evidenced by her obsession with a snowball in the freezer. One day, the snowball goes missing, and DW instantly loses her shit. Her mom comes in to find her crying literal tears of ice. Mrs. Reed tells DW to cut that shit out and get over herself. DW rebuffs, claiming the snowball represented the best day of her life, which mostly consisted of chucking snowballs at her family and one failed murder attempt by Arthur. Better luck next time, Arthur. DW admits to obsessing over the snowball for a whole year, refusing to let it out of her sight. Mrs. Reed ignores this obvious red flag and says she doesn't know who took the snowball. DW instinctively points the finger at Arthur. To be fair, he did try to kill her. Once. DW runs up to Arthur's room and completely destroys the place in 5 seconds flat. Buster is intrigued by DW's paranoia and decides to play detective. DW says she last saw the snowball yesterday, right before Grandma Thora stopped by for a visit. DW then perjures herself by claiming that Grandma Thora was happy to see her. Arthur calls DW on her BS and describes an equally narcissistic, but slightly more realistic scene.
Get me an aspirin. She's giving me a splitting headache.
Surprise, surprise, it's Grandma Thora. DW lays on what little charm she has to get Grandma Thora on her side. Grandma Thora and Mrs. Reed are so desperate to avoid this bullcrap, they're magically transported from the kitchen to the front door. Grandma Thora reminds everyone that she was invited for ice cream. DW jumps to the logical conclusion that the dog used an umbrella to open the freezer and eat the snowball. Francine calls DW on her BS. She tells her own narcissistic version of events in which Buster is the culprit. Buster pulls a reverse Uno and makes Francine look like the culprit. Desperate for a culprit, DW blames all three of them and tries to pull a Brendan Dassey on her brother.
I want a confession. Confess. Confess.
Buster claims there's only one logical answer. Aliens. Buster points out that the plate the snowball was on is also missing, a fact that nobody follows up on. DW accuses everyone of conspiring against her, as everybody blames each other for the stupidest crime ever conceived. Mr. Reed, who hasn't been in the whole episode and is obviously the culprit, comes in and diffuses the situation by pointing to the snow outside. When DW laments that she'll never know what happened to the snowball, Arthur does what he should have done 11 minutes ago, and points out that it doesn't fucking matter. Also, it's revealed aliens took the snowball or whatever, but seriously, it was definitely the dad. Let's review. DW lost her goddamn mind over a misplaced ball of ice that she'd been obsessing over for a year. She automatically blamed Arthur and destroyed his room trying to find it. She wasted 5 people's time in her pointless investigation into an equally pointless crime. She jumped to unrealistic conclusions and inspired everyone else to do the same. When she couldn't prove who did it, she tried to force a confession out of her brother. And in the end, none of it even mattered, because there probably never was any snowball. It was probably just a hallucination she cooked up in her demented, psychotic brain. F you, DW. And I say, Arthur is watching Nova when DW enters his line of vision. Arthur is so used to DW's shit, He predicts everything she says right before she says it. Francine keeps DW from eavesdropping on her conversation by spelling words instead of saying them. Because DW is so illiterate, she should change her middle name from Winifred to Can't. Arthur tells his parents he wants to see the latest Michael Bay movie.
5,000 explosions and a supernova? It's got science in it, okay?
DW also wants to see the movie, but Arthur says she's not smart enough to understand it. DW claims she's just as smart as her brother, despite moments ago admitting she can't read. DW schmoozes with the brain so she can learn how to make Arthur even more of her bitch. DW takes a liking to science once she realizes she can use it to demonstrate superiority over others. DW makes fun of Arthur for taking more time to do his homework than the smartest kid in school. Arthur tells his parents DW is being a pain in the ass. DW refutes his claim by acting like a know-it-all pain in the ass. Arthur plans to go to the new science center with the brain. DW also wants to go, but Arthur and his parents say hell no. DW goes into full sociopath mode as she uses an ominous monotone to warn Arthur that she plans to get the best of him.
Arthur, my theory is, someday you're going to be begging to go to the Explororium with me.
The next day, DW is charging kids to see her backyard sideshow. She tells Arthur to cough up $5 if he wants to see his own backyard. Instead of cutting through the house, Arthur hands over everything in his pocket, including a picture of a horse's ass, a fitting description of what he'll become by the end of the episode. DW takes the group on our own educational carnival and proceeds to plant misinformation in their impressionable minds. Arthur tries to refute her pseudoscience, only to be met with cries of fake news from DW and indifference from kids who don't know any better. Arthur brings the brain in to stomp out the monster he helped create. DW is making bank, as the line for her Museum of Misinformation stretches down the block. The Tibble twins are so excited for the exhibit, they magically transport from the middle of the line to the backyard in under 2 seconds. The brain explains that there are books and studies that can call DW on her BS. DW once again cries fake news. Falling directly into DW's trap, Arthur begs his parents to let DW go with him to the science exhibit. When Arthur confronts DW about her scientific fallacies, she admits she purposely spread misinformation so she could trick Arthur into inviting her to the exhibit. Arthur stares in awe of his sister, who not only tricked him, but also dozens of kids with her intentional use of pseudoscience and managed to profit off the whole endeavor. Let's review. DW became hell-bent on proving she was smarter than her brother, despite the fact that she can't read. She cozied up to his smartest friend to try and make herself look smarter. When Arthur told her she couldn't go to a science exhibit with him, she purposefully spread misinformation to dozens of young children just so she could trick him into changing his mind. And even after she got exactly what she wanted, she made no effort to undo the damage she did and likely stunted several of her peers' educational development. F you, DW.
It's Halloween, and DW is driving Arthur insane with her squeaky, high-pitched hiccups. Arthur tries to scare her by dressing as a time traveler from 2020. Boo! While designing his own lame-ass costume, Arthur suffers through DW's incessant hiccups. She tries holding her breath, but can't even do that right. What a bitch. Arthur is so distraught that he heads straight to the library without cleaning DW's spit off his shirt. Gross. The brain suggests scaring DW with loud, obnoxious noises, which is like trying to scare John Wayne Gacy with pictures of clowns. It's been 3 days, and DW's hiccups are only getting worse. Instead of taking her to a pediatrician, the Reed parents just tell her to knock that shit off. DW gives Arthur a list of everything she's scared of, which looks like it was written by someone who majored in manifestos. Her fears include octopi, good cartoons, and eating gingerbread men, which apparently makes her feel like she's eating a real person. Dahmer Winifred Reed loses her shit after eating the cookie and burps in Arthur's face. Gross. DW tries to scare herself one last time by giving her favorite toy to the Tibble twins, because the only thing that truly scares DW is the concept of sharing. Surprise, surprise, it doesn't work. DW worries she'll be stuck with the hiccups for the next 70 years. God forbid this demon child makes it past the age of 7. Everyone is dressed up for trick-or-treating except for DW, who still manages to be the scariest one in the room. The Reed parents are... What the fuck is going on here? Mrs. Reed trips over a lamp, which somehow turns off all the lights in the house. Arthur appears in his weak-ass costume, spooking DW. DW berates her brother for scaring her, which is the one thing she asked him to do. As luck would have it, this manages to get rid of her hiccups for real. Unfortunately for Arthur, the hiccups have now been passed to him, continuing the curse's vicious cycle and... Okay, he definitely wears that sandwich suit in the bedroom. You can't convince me otherwise. Let's review. DW drove everyone crazy with her endless stream of hiccups. When Arthur tried to help get rid of them, she thanked him by spitting and burping in his face. She dragged her brother all over town, which proved to be a colossal waste of time. When Arthur did manage to scare the hiccups out of her, she yelled at him for doing exactly what she asked him to do. And in the end, none of it even mattered, because the writers liked this plotline so much, they reused it several times throughout the show. Happy Halloween! And F-U-D-W.
And I say, hey!
Miracle of miracles, DW has lost her voice. Better late than ever, God. Arthur takes advantage of the moment by telling her off directly to her face. He dreams of a utopia in which DW never speaks again. A dream the brain says could become a reality.
It could be more than a few days, Arthur. People can inexplicably lose their vocal facility for months. Years even.
Don't you do that! Don't you give me false hope like that! Francine tells Arthur he's being too mean, which is like the pot calling the kettle a bitch. Arthur learns DW will be sick in bed for several days. His jubilee is short-lived, however, once his mom makes him DW's slave. Over the next 4 days, DW becomes an outright tyrant, forcing Arthur to fulfill her every request, while Mrs. Reed does jack shit. One afternoon, Arthur discovers DW has been faking her laryngitis the whole time.
Now you have to go to the hospital and get 600 stitches.
What a dick. Mrs. Reed somehow doesn't understand why DW would pretend to be sick when she gets to have everything she wants and has Arthur as her own personal bitch boy. Arthur tries to catch her in the act with a hidden camera.
I'm scared to close my eyes. I'm scared to open them. I'm gonna die out here.
Francine has no sympathy for Arthur until she sees just how whipped he is by his baby sister. Francine decides to intervene, as Arthur is only allowed to be her cuck. Arthur and crew gaslight DW into thinking she's gone deaf, causing her to break her vow of silence. Mrs. Reed is now wise to DW's scheme, though once again, we never see her get punished. Arthur is relieved DW can talk again, until he realizes DW can talk again. And despite appearing at the start of the episode, Mr. Reed is nowhere to be found, because as soon as DW got sick, he probably left to go fuck Mr. Ratburn. The dude married an aardvark who's also a chef. Ratburn definitely has a type. Or at least a cooking fetish. Let's review. DW exploited her illness to get everything she wanted. After she got better, she continued to scam her family out of house and home for a whole week. When Arthur caught on to her scheme, DW used her mother's blind trust to gaslight Arthur into being her own cuck berry. And even after her scheme was exposed, she went right back to torturing Arthur with her whiny, ear-bleeding voice. And if you think I'm being too mean to the voice actor for DW, just keep in mind that of the 8 kids who voiced DW, every single one of them were boys. Merry Christmas, and FUDW.
And I say, hey!
It's New Year's Eve, and DW is getting a head start on being a pain in the ass for next year. She begs her mom to let her stay up till midnight, because 4-year-olds definitely don't have a habit of staying up past their bedtime. Mrs. Reed says DW is too young to stay up, leading to the most bizarre fourth wall break in the show.
It's like I never get any older. What if I'm trapped in some kind of time warp and I'll never get any older? Is that my fault?
After several failed attempts, Arthur decides he doesn't want to stay up this year, which sets off all of DW's sus alarms. Arthur claims he's just too mature, which is a word DW doesn't know. Shocker. Arthur goes around town to find out the true meaning of New Year's. Who cares? Arthur comes home to find DW pinching herself and dumping ice cubes down her back. He reminds her she's too young to stay up, which DW takes as a personal challenge. The Reed parents leave Grandma Thora in charge for the night, so DW goes into full kiss-ass mode. She stays up past her bedtime, making several excuses to leave her room. Grandma Thora falls for DW's BS and allows her to stay up with Arthur. It's a minute to midnight, and Arthur is dead-ass asleep. DW and Grandma Thora celebrate the new year by watching an alarm clock go off. Is their TV broken? Who celebrates New Year's like this? Feeling ripped off, DW blows off her grandma and decides to go to bed, but not before gaslighting Arthur into thinking he's missed the best New Year's ever.
I saw New Year's and you didn't. Big explosions and giant mules jumping off cliffs into the ocean. Wow, it was fantastic.
What a dick. Grandma Thora assures Arthur the new year will be full of hopes and promises. Like the hope that DW will be less annoying, and the promise that I'll keep making these videos as long as you keep watching them. Let's review. DW disobeyed her parents' wishes and decided to stay up till midnight just to spite her brother. To make herself stay awake, she made a complete ass of herself and manipulated her grandma to get what she wanted. When the New Year's celebration didn't live up to her expectations, she accused her grandma of ripping her off. And even after she got exactly what she wanted, she still had to rub it in Arthur's face. And the Reed parents didn't make it home till the next morning, because their New Year's party was just a cover story, and they actually spent the night having a threesome with Mr. Ratburn. Happy New Year, and F you, DW.
And I say, hey!
It's breakfast time, and DW is chewing out Arthur harder than a bowl of Crunch cereal. Because while she might not like breakfast, DW always fills up on vitamin CUNT. Arthur is exhausted, since DW has been keeping him up all night with her non-stop banging.
Get your head out of the gutter!
Arthur explains DW has been slamming doors and screaming at everyone non-stop.
You're just making me go to bed because you don't want me around. You don't love me. You wish I wasn't even born.
Say what you want about the Reed parents, but at least they never scold their kids for telling the truth. The next night, Arthur invites Francine over for a kosher dinner of French fries and mashed potatoes. Are they hypoglycemic? What's with all the starch? DW is pigging out. Mrs. Reed tries to be a responsible parent for once, which earns her more jabs and insults from DW. Francine tells her to knock that shit off, shattering DW's fragile ego. Once again, the Reed parents don't do a goddamn thing to discipline their child. Francine takes it upon herself to figure out why DW is being a total doofus. Her words, not mine.
I'm too tired to think of any more mean things to say.
That's a first. DW's tantrum is getting worse, to the point Arthur's worried the cops might get involved.
You have the right to remain silent.
I will not be silent. I'll be as loud as I want, and you can't stop me. No one can stop me.
God, if only. Francine deduces DW is in a very bad mood because she's upset about something.
The phrase, "no shit, Sherlock," comes to mind.
Instead of just asking DW why she's upset, Francine and Arthur decide to spy on her and fail miserably.
Something wrong. It's because Arthur is a dodo brain!
Got him! DW tells Francine to fuck off, prompting Mrs. Reed to scold her child for the second time in her life. Too little, too late. DW tells her mom she wants to go to the movies. Mrs. Reed tells her to fuck off. Francine volunteers to take DW to the movies, giving Arthur a panic attack. Arthur and Francine take DW to the movies, only to realize she dragged them there to crash a birthday party she wasn't invited to for a girl she barely knows. DW tries to one-up the birthday girl, only to make a fool of herself, and then demands to leave before the movie even starts. Francine confronts DW about her scheme, but never questions why DW was taking her anger out on her family rather than the girl who didn't invite her to the party. DW describes her ultimate revenge fantasy, in which she not only rains out Lisa's party, but drains the color out of their bodies. Jesus Christ. Francine resolves to keep DW's sociopathic fantasies at bay by inviting her to her own birthday party. DW is thrilled, as she now gets to brag to Lisa about being invited to a third-grade birthday party. Only we never see Lisa again after this episode, because she was probably murdered by DW and buried in a shallow grave. Let's review. DW went on an unholy tyrant of screaming and slamming doors because she didn't get invited to a random girl's birthday party. She took out her frustrations on her family, who did little to nothing to discipline her bad behavior. She tricked Francine and Arthur into wasting their own money just so she could crash the birthday party and then immediately leave when things didn't go her way. And in the end, not only was she never punished for her bad mood, but she was even rewarded with a trip to the movies and an invitation to an older kid's birthday party. So remember, kids, don't forget what happened to the man who bitched and moaned until he got everything he wanted. He lived happily ever after. F you, DW.
And I say, hey!
Arthur is excited for his first sleepover with Buster in the brain. Mr. Reed reminds him that his sleepover isn't until Saturday, and tells him to get rid of his prematurely pitched tent. During breakfast, Mr. Reed shares an article about an alleged UFO sighting. DW sees this as her ticket to fame and fortune. DW plans to take a picture of the UFO with her rabbit-shaped camera, which is cute until you realize rabbits are people in this world. DW accidentally takes a picture of herself walking in on her father with Mr. Ratburn. Buster says his mom doesn't want him to go to the sleepover because of the UFO story. Fortunately, she changes her mind with little to no prompting from Mrs. Reed. That night, the three boys dream about the aliens and the sleepover, with Arthur's being the scariest.
Arthur, Mom and Dad say you have to let me come to your sleepover.
The next day, Mr. Reed is setting up the tent. No, get the fuck out of here with those sandals. DW is looking for UFOs in the daytime, as one does. She suspects her dad of being an alien imposter. Her suspicions are confirmed when Mr. Reed acts as a responsible parent and disciplines his child. It's the night of the sleepover, and DW is 2 for 2 on crashing parties she's not invited to. Arthur tells her, in no uncertain terms, to fuck off. Mrs. Reed tells DW to go to bed.
confirming both Reed parents have been swapped with aliens who actually know how to discipline the 4-year-old Brat. The boys look for a flashlight, unaware DW has already taken it.
Where do you keep that? I'll never tell.
The sleepover is in full swing when the boys spot a UFO outside their tent. Surprise, surprise, it turns out it was just DW, who is determined to ruin any gathering she's not invited to. The boys get their revenge by scaring the shit out of her. DW catches on to their scheme and calls them out. Just then, an actual UFO shows up. DW practically wakes the neighborhood screaming about how rich she'll be, unaware she's fallen for Arthur's prank. DW heads back inside with her tail between her legs. And yes, aardvarks have tails. Arthur makes the foolish mistake of pitying his sister and inviting her to the sleepover, which she enjoys for all of 5 seconds.
This is boring. I'm going to bed.
What the fuck? The episode ends with the same shot from the 8-minute mark because animation is expensive. Let's review. DW became obsessed with finding proof of UFOs in order to get rich. She decided to use Arthur's sleepover as a means to get her proof, even though she wasn't invited. When Arthur told her she couldn't come, DW went out of her way to ruin his sleepover and then shat the bed when the boys got their revenge. And even after Arthur begrudgingly invited her to the sleepover, she bailed the second things got boring. F you, DW.
And I say, hey!
Arthur explains how the bleep button is used while filming a show, which raises several questions. For example, wouldn't it make more sense to just add the bleep in post? And if the show's being filmed with bleeps in mind, why not just write the show without swears? Whatever, we're not even at the 2-minute mark and already my brain is fried. Arthur shows how the bleep can be used on his show, inspiring millions of YouTube poops for years to come.
Mom! Arthur just your favorite bird!
That's nasty.
DW takes control of the button and refuses to stop ing Arthur. DW is bull shopping with Grandma Thora when she overhears an older boy call his mama. Instead of asking her grandma what the word means, DW decides to pester Arthur.
What does mean?
God damn it. Arthur tells her not to say the word around their parents. Her imaginary friend tells her to just ask her parents what means. DW ignores her conscience, believing the word will make people break things whenever they hear it. Still wanting to know what the word means, DW decides to ask Tweedledee and Tweedledum, who tell her the word is used to hypnotize adults into doing whatever you want. They encourage her to say it in front of their teacher, but she chickens out at the last second. The Tibbles call her a scaredy cat, which is a weird insult when you realize cats are people in this world. And also cats. She then decides to trick her next-door neighbor into saying the word to her family. DW spies on her neighbors from her bedroom when her mom calls her down to dinner, leading to the most unintentionally hilarious moment in the episode. The Molinas rat out DW to her parents, leading her to fall back on her go-to excuse.
Arthur did it?
What a... The Reed parents decide not to punish her because she didn't know what she was saying, which is some real bullshit. Unfortunately, the damage is already done because the next day at preschool, everyone is swearing like sailors, which just goes to prove that the consequences of your actions don't go away just because of ignorance. Let's review. DW learned a bad word and refused to ask any grown-up what it means. She ruined Arthur's plane again and ignored her conscience, who begged her to tell her parents. She instead confided in her 2 least reliable friends, who proceeded to trick her into thinking swear words give kids power over adults. DW was too chicken to test it out herself and tricked her younger neighbor into saying it instead, getting her in trouble with her parents. DW then proceeded to not only say in front of her mom, but used it as an intentional insult. And despite teaching all her friends to swear and calling her mama, DW is never punished because there is no God. And even though Arthur can't swear for real on his show, I certainly can on mine. Fuck you, DW.
And I say, hey!
Arthur is excited to go to summer camp when DW comes in to literally stomp on his dreams. As it turns out, the Reed parents have planned a week-long family vacation to the beach. Arthur tries to convince his parents they should go on the trip by themselves, until he realizes he'd have to bring DW to camp with him. DW insists on bringing her shark toy named Sharky, which she uses to knock Arthur on his ass. Before hitting the road, Mr. Reed asks DW if she needs to use the bathroom. DW says no. Then 5 minutes later makes the family pull over so she can use the bathroom. Because of this, the family gets stuck in traffic for several hours, trapping the Reeds in a hot car with a shitting baby. DW begs her parents to stop at a diner for lunch.
Well, there's Chef's surprise. Surprises are fun.
Is that why you have 3 kids? Surprise, surprise, the chef's surprise is surprisingly shit. DW badgers a group of bikers into giving her one of their burgers, which she shares with no one. The Reeds are back on the road when Sharky accidentally falls into another truck. DW refuses to stop screaming, forcing her dad to chase the truck for several hours. The Reed family arrives several hours late to the hotel, which has already given away their suite to another family. Mr. Reed is so mad he changes into Arthur's clothes in 2 seconds flat. The new room is a piece of shit. DW and Arthur are forced to share a bed, which DW insists on also sharing with Sharky. Arthur tries to make the most of the pool, but DW can't even let him enjoy that. Mr. Reed treats the family to a lobster dinner, and inexplicably allows DW to bring her goddamn shark toy. DW freaks out at the sight of the lobster and makes a scene in the restaurant. The next day, the Reeds are stuck inside because of the rain, as they start to realize spending a whole vacation with DW might have been a bad idea. Arthur reaches his breaking point and prepares to give DW a long overdue ass whooping.
I'ma kick her ass.
Someday, but not today.
Arthur single-handedly saves his family's vacation by taking them to local tourist attractions. DW insists on picking the next activity and ends up dragging her family to a gory shark movie.
I can't believe you chose this movie. Don't look at me. It was Sharky's idea.
Okay, but that's worse. I mean, you do get how that's worse, right?
The rain has stopped, and the Reed family finally gets the beach day they wanted. Arthur ends the vacation on a high note by burying DW alive. Let's review. DW ruined her family's whole vacation. A vacation that would have been 10 times better if she hadn't come at all. Don't believe me? If everyone except DW had went on vacation, they wouldn't have had to stop for unnecessary bathroom breaks, which means they would have avoided the traffic and wouldn't have had to chase down any rogue sharks. They would have made it to the hotel on time, meaning they would have gotten to spend the whole vacation in the family fun suite and would have been able to enjoy their lobster dinner in peace. They still could have spent the rainy day exploring the town and avoided being traumatized at the movies. Plus, they still would have had their family fun day at the beach, without DW and her stupid fucking shark. And we never see Sharky again after this episode, because DW probably got bored of him after a week and buried his body in a shallow grave on the beach. F you, DW.
And I say, hey!
Arthur and his mom return from the store with groceries. DW wastes no time criticizing their selections. Maybe next time you can drive to the store and buy whatever you want with your money. Arthur describes DW as a picky eater because you can't say fickle bitch on PBS. DW lists out all the food she doesn't like, with spinach being at the top of the list. She also lists the food she does like, including PB&J, ice cream, and hot chocolate mixed with her brother's tears. The next night, the Reed family goes out to dinner. DW refuses to eat her salad, begging the question, why did she order it in the first place? DW realizes it's made with spinach and instantly loses her shit.
This is spinach, and I hate spinach!
Then why did you ask for it?
DW launches her dinner onto the waiter, making him quit on the spot. And let me tell you, I used to work the graveyard shift at a Burger King, and getting an employee to quit in the middle of their shift is no small feat. The Reeds get kicked out of the restaurant. They return home where Grandma Thora is babysitting Kate. Looks like the Reed parents brought the wrong baby to dinner. DW is grounded.
Finally! Oh, yes, you're grounded. You're grounded.
Mrs. Reed makes it clear DW will not be going to any more restaurants anytime soon, including Grandma Thora's birthday dinner. Grandma Thora says she doesn't want to go out to dinner without DW.
It just wouldn't be a happy birthday if DW wasn't there.
Bullshit! Arthur worries he'll never get to do anything fun without his sister, including going to Jupiter, which doesn't make any sense because Jupiter is an uninhabitable gas giant, and Arthur would know that if his teacher spent more time teaching instead of lusting after Mr. Reed and his pastry sack. Arthur has 6 days to completely change DW's personality, but unlike the book where DW realizes what she's missing out on and decides to change on her own, Arthur chooses to trick her instead. He fools her into eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich filled with spinach, causing her to barf directly onto the camera. Gross. It's 2 days until Grandma Thora's birthday, and all of Arthur's plans have failed miserably. Arthur says he has no choice but to resort to Plan X. Arthur pretends to call Grandma Thora to make DW think they're going to the restaurant after all. DW changes her mind once she realizes her family might have fun without her and begs her parents to let her come. The Reed family celebrate Grandma Thora's birthday at the Once Upon a Restaurant, which looks like a child's dream and a building inspector's nightmare. DW almost immediately tries to back out of her promise to her parents.
I hope they have peanut butter and chili sandwiches without spinach.
I thought you were going to try something new and eat it all.
Oh, yeah.
Their food is served by waiters dressed as the three bears, which is a weird costume when you remember bears are people in this world. And also bears. DW orders the Little Bo Peep Pot Pie. Her family waits with bated breath for her inevitable tantrum. Thankfully, DW loves the pot pie, which, surprise, surprise, consists mostly of spinach, and not lamb as the name of the dish would imply. DW tries to gaslight her family into thinking she loved spinach the whole time. Let's review. DW refused to eat anything that wasn't sweet and sugary. She made a scene at a restaurant which resulted in their waiter quitting his job in the middle of the dinner shift. She publicly embarrassed her family and got them banned from the restaurant. She put Grandma Thor's birthday dinner in jeopardy and refused to change her eating habits until she thought her family might enjoy a nice meal without her. She only agreed to eat spinach by being tricked into doing so, and then tried to gaslight her family once she realized she actually liked it. So remember, kids, she's a pain in the rump who eats what she wants. She's DW, the Thunder Cunt. F-U-D-W.
And I say, hey!
Arthur is in the middle of a Mad Max when DW comes in full fury. She arrests Arthur in the middle of the race and locks him up without a trial. Arthur says DW sometimes gets carried away, which is like saying Hitler once got carried away in Poland. DW is at the library, where a firefighter is giving a speech about safety. The firefighter gives DW a whistle and deputizes her as a junior safety officer. A hollow gesture with a meaningless title that gives DW all the ammo she needs to launch a tirade of tattling on the unsuspecting populace. DW uses her whistle to stop a kid from getting hit by a car, which is nice, but what dumbass kid just runs into the middle of the road?
Matthew!
Touché, DW. Touché. The woman thanks DW for saving her son's life, unintentionally stroking DW's ego to full mast. Arthur and the Brain are building a derby car for the upcoming rally race when DW blows her whistle directly in their face. She says the car is unsafe to drive, despite the fact that it's obviously not finished. Mrs. Reed blindly agrees with DW, forcing the boys to rebuild their car from scratch.
Better safe than sorry. That's what I always say.
You've never said that once in your life, and you know it. DW proceeds to snitch on everybody in town. Stitches be damned. She drives her family crazy with her non-stop whistleblowing and barges in on Arthur during a bath. What the fuck? Arthur and crew decide to stalk DW to catch her breaking her own rules, time that could be better spent building a dope-ass derby car for the race. DW is skipping down the street, waving her arms around like a dumbass. Arthur nearly catches DW off her guard before getting a chocolate surprise to the face. Arthur worries DW will ruin the race with her ungodly obsession with safety. The Reed parents tell Arthur he has to bring her, much to his dismay. DW says she only wants people to be safe. Her parents tell her to stop being a fucking tattletale. It's the day of the race, and DW is itching for a snitchin'. Arthur tells her to fuck off until the race is over. DW is stuck in the back of the crowd, unable to tattle to her full potential. She decides to climb a tree so she can continue to look down on everyone. As it turns out, DW is just as bad at climbing down trees as she is at keeping her mouth shut. The race comes to a screeching halt as the fire department rushes to get her down. The parents of the year show up just as the hoopla dies down. Arthur tries to lie to his parents to spare DW the embarrassment of what just happened, but she can't even avoid snitching on herself. DW tells her parents what happened, getting both her and Arthur in trouble.
You both know better.
And you know better than to let your daughter out in public without a leash. By the grace of God, DW seems to have learned her lesson, as she no longer uses her whistle to butt into other people's business. And we never find out who won the race, but it's likely Arthur's car fell apart right after the fade to black, because he wasted all his time trying to put DW in her place when he could have been building the best derby car the world will never see.
Let's review.
DW used a safety lecture as an excuse to snitch on her friends and family. She drove everyone crazy with her non-stop screaming and whistleblowing. She invaded everyone's privacy and threatened to ruin the race for Arthur. When Arthur tried to get rid of her, she put snitching above her own safety, creating a public emergency and delaying the race. And even when Arthur tried to keep DW from getting in trouble with their parents, she couldn't resist the urge to snitch one last time before throwing in the towel. F-U-D-W.
And I say, hey!
DW is playing with her dolls. She imagines a scenario where a bride and her servant are trapped in a lifeboat surrounded by hungry sharks. We're not even 10 seconds into the episode, and already DW's unquenchable bloodlust is on full display. DW refuses to share her toys with baby Kate, who accidentally breaks one of the dolls.
DW cries to her mom that Kate killed her favorite doll, which is some very specific wording to say the least. Mrs. Reed ignores her daughter's psychopathic tendencies and tells her to play nice with Kate. DW continues to bully her baby sister, even threatening to pinch her until she cries. Mrs. Reed has had enough of DW's shit and tells her to go to her room.
But what did I do?
You were born.
DW is surprised her actions actually have consequences. She convinces herself this is all Kate's fault. DW begs her mom to let her come back downstairs. Mrs. Reed tells her she can come downstairs in 10 minutes. DW starts crying that her mom doesn't love her, which she instantly stops once Mrs. Reed is out of earshot. DW impatiently watches the clock, fearing that time has stopped. She leaves her room to find that time has in fact frozen, and she couldn't be more thrilled. She takes advantage of the moment by stealing Arthur's cookie and giving away his dog to the Tibbles.
What is wrong with you?
Surprise, surprise, it turns out it was just her imagination. Her father sends her back upstairs.
You don't have to treat me like a criminal.
We both know that's not true, and my legal team is gathering evidence as we speak.
DW is 2 minutes into her punishment, which so far she's managed to spend entirely outside her room. DW claims she has the meanest parents in the whole world. DW is such a bad liar, even her imaginary friend calls BS. DW reminds Nadine of when she was forced to be Arthur's slave while he was sick, which didn't happen. And the time her family went to Cousin Lucy's wedding without her while she was forced to stay home and clean, which also didn't happen. DW leaves her room again to beg her mom to end her punishment. When her scheme fails, DW decides to go over her parents' head and tattle to Grandma Thora. Nadine reminds DW she isn't allowed to walk to Grandma Thora's house by herself, which wasn't a problem when she ran away when Kate was born. Instead of just calling Grandma Thora, DW decides to sneak out the window until she remembers how gravity works. DW leaves her room for the 4th time in 10 minutes to find her family playing happily without her.
They don't miss me. They're glad I'm not there.
I mean, you're not wrong. Mrs. Reed asks DW to watch over Kate, which is exactly how this mess got started in the first place. DW claims Kate has been a pain in her ass all day, like when she kept DW from shoplifting, interrupted her playtime, and selfishly demanded for DW to share her toys. DW comes to the realization that she is a horrible garbage child, and apologizes to Kate. Too little, too late. Her mom comes in to tell her that her punishment is over, even though she was only actually in her room for about 5 minutes. DW now wants to stay in her room and play with Kate, but just when it seems like she's changed for the better, DW goes right back to torturing her dolls by feeding them to her sharks. Let's review. DW refused to share her toys and threatened to hurt her baby sister. When she got grounded, she spent half her punishment sneaking out of her room. She tried to paint herself as the victim by making up blatant lies about her family and tried to run away to her grandma's house. She convinced herself her parents didn't love her anymore and that baby Kate was the source of the blame. And it was only after her epiphany that DW realized how much she sucks and decided to show a shred of dignity to her sister. F you, DW.
And I say, hey!
Arthur explains how DW demands everything be equal and balanced, which is nice until you realize she's the one holding the scale. DW is using a playdate with Emily as an excuse to stroke her ego. She brags that all her toys are better. DW's pride is put in jeopardy when she discovers Emily has a French nanny. Instead of telling her mom why she's upset, DW comes up with a scheme to get a French nanny of her own. DW is having dinner with her family, and the brain, for some reason, when her parents tell her she's going to start getting allowance of 75 cents a week, which nowadays would be roughly $1.25. Not too shabby. DW plans to flex her cash to her friends, as she believes all relationships are monetarily transactional. However, she soon realizes her friends already get allowances and earn much more than she does. DW resolves to correct this problem by billing her parents for all the money she believes she deserves. The Reed parents tell her to fuck off. DW decides to go the opposite route and become a total kiss-ass. She does all the chores in the house, working herself sick and breaking half the dishes in the process. She tries to goad her mother into raising her allowance and fails miserably. DW pretends to be sick so she can stay home from preschool. She tries calling the mayor to demand everyone get paid the same amount of money, which actually isn't a terrible idea the more I think about it. DW pesters Arthur and his friends to find out how much their allowances are, which leads to the group having a fight that threatens to end their friendship for good. DW realizes she can just lie to her friends about how much money she has, even though none of them actually give a shit. Mrs. Reed tells DW she should be grateful for what she has and shouldn't be jealous of those who have more. The lesson goes right over DW's head as she struts into class acting like she's the Grand Fromage, which is French for pretentious bitch. DW offers to buy milk tickets for everyone in class, until Miss Morgan points out that all her money is fake, DW's ruse is exposed and has a full breakdown in the middle of class. Emily takes pity on DW and offers to share her allowance so they can stay friends. DW demands to see the money first. The Tibbles point out that Emily is more generous than DW, leading DW to try to be more generous than Emily. DW quickly backtracks and says they should each keep their own allowance. DW promises to never obsess over money again, only to immediately break her promise and hit up her grandma for extra allowance. And we never see Emily's nanny again after this episode, because she was probably murdered by DW so she and Emily could truly be equal. Let's review. DW became green with envy at the thought that her friend might have something she doesn't. When her parents started giving her an allowance, her first instinct was to flaunt it to her friends. When she realized her friends make more money than her, she tried to extort her parents for a higher allowance. She prompted a fight among Arthur's friends which threatened to end their friendship for good. DW ignored her mother's advice and proceeded to flaunt her imaginary wealth to her classmates, only to make a fool of herself. And even after she made up with her friends, she still tried to go over her parents' heads and extort her grandma for extra cash. F you, DW.
And I say, hey!
Arthur is watching the Olympics, and DW couldn't give a rat's ass. She'd rather watch My Little Pony, until she discovers the Olympics give out gold medals. DW begs her mom to let her sign up for gymnastics, specifically so she can win awards and get famous. Mrs. Reed reminds DW she's quit every other activity she's joined after only a few days. A waste of time and money that could have been better spent on counseling and ADHD medication. Desperate for any excuse to get her daughter out of the house and off her ass, Mrs. Reed begrudgingly agrees to take DW to gymnastics lessons. DW discovers she's in the same class as Emily and the Tibble-twats. We see Emily in the company of her replacement nanny, who was probably hired after her previous nanny disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Mrs. Reed describes Emily as smart, pretty, and polite. 3 traits DW lacks in spades. DW tries to get on the balance beam so she can one-up Emily in front of the class. Her instructor tells her she won't be allowed to use the balance beam for at least a year, and has the kids pair up to do somersaults instead.
Be my partner? I guess so.
The fuck was that about? DW attempts to do a somersault and falls flat on her ass. Emily shows her how to do it correctly, only to be mocked and insulted by, "Why is this kid blue?" The kids move on to handstands, as Emily proves she's way too advanced for a beginner's class. DW's jealousy causes her to fall over, knocking over several of her classmates in the process. She then tries to do a cartwheel and manages to fall all the way off the mat. The next day, DW is practicing her moves in the most reckless way possible. She goes to the grocery store and ends up destroying the place with her shitty cartwheels. The next week in class, the kids are back to doing cartwheels when, hold on, are blue rabbits actually a thing in nature? Huh, I'll be damned. DW manages to finally do a cartwheel, only to get shown up by Emily. The instructor scolds Emily for showing off before leaving the kids alone for several plot-convenient minutes. Emily apologizes to DW because that's what a good friend does. DW rebuffs her apology and decides to do a cartwheel on the balance beam. The Tibbles goad her on as she nearly falls to her death.
Jump! Jump! Jump!
For some unexplicable reason, Emily tries to keep DW from killing herself and rushes to get Mrs. Reed and the instructor from outside. What exactly were they doing together outside before Emily got them? The world may never know. The Tibbles are giving Emily shit for being a snitch when DW tells them to fuck off. DW apologizes for being a jealous brat and Emily offers to help her improve her cartwheels. Unfortunately, DW loses all interest in gymnastics when she sees a horse on the ride home, and begs her mom to let her take horse riding lessons. Thus the snake has consumed its own tail. Let's review. DW begs her mom to let her take gymnastics despite her history of quitting every activity she's tried. She instantly got jealous of her friend and took every opportunity to try and put her down. She struggled to do the most basic moves and destroyed an entire grocery store with her janky-ass cartwheels. When Emily bested her again, DW tried to do the most dangerous thing she could think of, risking her own life. And even after she made up with Emily, she decided to ditch gymnastics after only a week to pursue riding lessons. Once again at the expense of her mother's time and money. F.U. DW.
And I say, hey!
Arthur is having a peaceful afternoon at the library when DW comes in to ruin the vibe. Arthur laments about being forced to bring DW even though she can't read, which is like bringing a blind man to a puppet show. DW keeps shouting at Arthur to help her read, despite the signs that say no talking. DW says she can't read the sign, even though she's been to the library before and would therefore already know the rules. Arthur tries to open the show before DW interrupts him to throw his own words back in his face.
Shh! The sign says no talking.
What a bitch. DW begs Arthur to check out a picture book for her. Arthur tells her to get out of here with that shit, as that weak-ass baby nonsense would fuck up his street cred. The head librarian, Paige Turner, tells DW she can check out the book herself if she gets her own library card. The only requirement, you have to write your name. Once again, DW's illiteracy proves to be the source of her own demise. DW brags about all the books she'll be able to get once she has a library card. Arthur tells her to nut up or shut up. DW spends 3 hours trying and failing to write her own name, wasting 5 trees worth of paper in the process. DW is mad at her parents for giving her a difficult name, while the rest of us are mad at them for giving birth to her at all. DW discovers she actually can write and wastes all the mashed potatoes spelling out her name.
Look how well DW Reed writes!
DW gets her library card and the power immediately goes to her head. As it turns out, the book she wanted has already been checked out. Miss Turner assures her the book will be back next week. Unfortunately for Miss Turner, DW doesn't have that kind of patience. DW calls the library every day to check if the book has been returned. 7 days later, DW wakes up Arthur at 6:30 on a Saturday. Like an asshole. They get to the library only to discover the book hasn't been returned yet. DW demands the police get involved. Arthur refuses to waste his weekend at the library and plans to leave without her. That is until DW threatens to tattle to their mom like the snitch she is. DW watches the front desk like a hawk and even harasses poor Aloysius Zimmerplatz, who only wanted to read about trains. Surprise, surprise, it turns out the Tibbleturds had the book the whole time. The terrible twosome warns her if she damages the book, the library will take away her card forever, which is a scary thought until you remember DW can't actually read, so it'd be more like taking away shoes from a guy with no legs. DW is so scared of damaging the book she keeps it hidden in a shoebox all week with her blankie, which I promise I'll talk about later. Arthur assures her the book won't explode if she opens it.
I'll open it if you're so worried.
Arthur realizes this is the first book he ever checked out, which is something he definitely would have remembered before now, considering how horny he is for books. Being a good big brother, Arthur reads the book for DW, who laments she has to return the book that day. Arthur tells her she can renew the book as many times as she wants, which immediately backfires once he realizes DW will force him to read the book to her until the end of time. And we never see Aloysius Zimmerplatz again after this episode, because after getting harassed by DW, he was too scared to return to the library. He likely entered witness protection and assumed the new identity of Beulah McKerney. Let's review. DW made a huge fuss over getting her library card so she could check out a book she can't even read, which is like obsessing over getting your license even though you don't have a car. The only thing standing in the way of her getting a library card was her own illiteracy, which she wasted several tons of paper trying to conquer. When she couldn't check out the book she wanted, she badgered the library every day for a week until it was returned. And even after she got the book, she was too scared to read it for fear of getting her library card taken away. When Arthur graciously offered to read the book to her, she rewarded his kindness with the promise of eternal tedium and repetition. So remember, kids, if your younger sibling asks you to read to them, don't play nice, because they'll make you read it twice. A day. Every day, for the rest of your life. F-U-D-W.
Arthur is doing his homework when he catches DW coloring in his schoolbook on animals, which I guess in this world would be labeled as anatomy. Arthur says he likes to imagine how great life would be without DW. Welcome to the club. He says DW would be way more useful as a jackass or a superhero. But trust me, the last thing you want to do is give this brat superpowers. Arthur is bored. Instead of just watching TV like any other bored child, his mom suggests playing with DW. DW promises not to be annoying in the most annoying way possible. Arthur suggests they try baseball, but DW refuses to play without her doll. Arthur calls it quits, claiming DW is a baby, which is an insult to babies everywhere. Arthur decides to watch Bionic Bunny, but DW wants to watch Mary Moo Cow so she can learn about the color green, even though most infants have a basic understanding of colors after 18 months. Mrs. Reed sides with DW, since she had the remote first.
That's tough. That's fair.
DW complains that Arthur never wants to play with her. Arthur says it's because she's boring, and also a bitch. DW reasons that if she acts more like Arthur, he'll want to spend more time with her. DW starts copying everything Arthur does, even watching the shows he likes.
Ironically, Arthur actually takes a liking to DW, who gets more quality time with her brother like she said she wanted. The two put their differences aside and begin a lifelong friendship free of conflict. DW starts dressing like Arthur, copies his mannerisms, and even follows him to the boys' bathroom. What the hell? Things get worse as DW starts stalking Arthur and his friends everywhere they go, including the Sugar Bowl.
You're a henway.
What's a henway?
About 5 pounds.
Pretty sure that counts as a race joke. DW attempts to sit with Arthur's friends when a waiter kindly offers her a baby seat. DW responds by yelling in her face, like a baby. Arthur grows more annoyed as even Binky can't tell the two apart. Why couldn't she be the version of Arthur Binky beat up? Arthur tells his parents DW is ruining his life. It turns out he didn't get invited to his friend's pool party because of her, which, all joking aside, genuinely sucks. Instead of talking to DW about her annoying behavior, the Reed parents push that shit onto Arthur.
Why can't you?
This is between the two of you.
Fuck all the way off. The next day, the Tibbletaints invite DW over to watch VeggieTales. DW says that cartoon is only for babies, which is a bold-faced lie.
I'm playing soccer with Arthur. Sounds boring.
Right, because the one thing everyone knows about soccer is how boring it is. Arthur has reached his breaking point and tells DW to stop copying him. DW points out she only started copying him after he called her a boring baby. Arthur recognizes his mistake and apologizes for hurting her feelings, promising to spend more time with her in the future. But just when it seems like we might get a happy ending, DW reveals her true intentions.
And Mom said I can watch Mary Moo Cow every day for as many days as you watched Bionic Bunny.
Huh. So I guess all that stuff about wanting to spend more time with her brother was a big old crock of shit. Arthur is left to wallow in his own defeat, once again bested by the tyrannical toddler. Let's review. DW copied everything her brother did to trick him into spending more time with her. Her scheme included getting her mom to buy her a whole new wardrobe, which she immediately discarded after she succeeded. She stalked Arthur everywhere he went, refusing to give him any privacy. She ostracized Arthur from his friends after yelling at a waiter who was only doing her job. When Arthur begged his parents to intervene, they refused to do jack shit. And even after Arthur apologized for hurting DW's feelings, it turns out she only did it so she could get more TV time for herself. Thankfully, this is the only time we see DW try to copy her brother, because while imitation might be the most sincere form of flattery, copying someone else's style just makes you look like an unoriginal hack. DW is trash. DW
is trash.
And I say, hey!
DW's preschool class goes to the aquarium to look at all the mammals who aren't fortunate enough to be people in this world. Miss Morgan takes the girls to the bathroom, God bless her, where DW is one of the few kids actively trying to destroy the place. The kids visit the Hall of Sea Monsters, where, unsurprisingly, DW is the biggest monster in the room. DW sees an octopus for the first time and instantly craps her pants. She lies to her family about fighting off the octopus with her bare hands. Arthur calls BS. He scares her with a fake octopus, which is obviously a rubber spider. Wait, are octopi spiders of the ocean? Nope, there's actual ocean spiders. Someone needs to make an underwater Spider-Man spin-off now.
Get on with it!
Arthur gets grounded. DW dreams about Arthur getting eaten by an octopus, much to her violent delight. She spends the night in her parents' bed, preventing them from spawning another mistake. The next day, Arthur accidentally breaks the AC, and DW cheers with glee in anticipation of his punishment. However, the Reeds decide to take the family to the lake to beat the heat. DW refuses to go, even after Arthur correctly points out that octopi don't live near lakes. Instead of hiring a babysitter or dropping DW off at Grandma Thora's house, the Reed parents drag DW to the lake kicking and screaming. DW refuses to calm down, even making her baby sister cry. Buster tries to go into the water without his swim cap until DW rats him out to the lifeguard. Arthur and friends are having fun on the raft while DW stays in her towel fort, giving herself heat stroke. Instead of taking her home, Mrs. Reed begs Arthur to play with DW for 10 minutes. DW forces Arthur and Buster to rescue her from her sandcastle, while getting laughed at by all the girls at the lake. 10 minutes later, Arthur is back in the water while DW begs her dad to force Arthur to play with her. Arthur and friends are playing keep away with Buster's swim cap, pretending it's a ravenous octopus. Because DW doesn't recognize obvious sarcasm, she assumes her brother is actually getting attacked and tries to warn her dad. Mr. Reed tells her to fuck off. DW resorts to tattling to the lifeguard and ruins the vibe for everyone. The lifeguard tells the group they shouldn't pretend to scream for help, which is honestly valid beach etiquette. DW spends the rest of the day forcing Arthur to give her horsey rides. Seahorsey rides. Arthur collapses in exhaustion as Mrs. Reed returns from God knows where to take them all home. The day comes to an end as DW begs her mom to bring her back to the beach tomorrow, before promptly passing out.
You're not still scared of octopuses, are you? Octopuses live in oceans, not lakes.
I don't see any octopuses.
Honey, there are no octopuses on this beach.
There aren't any octopuses here. And she said that octopuses don't like lakes.
That's my little octopusy.
Let's review. DW lost her mind when she discovered octopi and made it everyone else's problem. She ruined her family's trip to the lake with her non-stop screaming and crying. She forced her brother to play with her, embarrassing him in front of everyone and making the lake less fun for his friends. When Arthur tried to have fun without her, she snitched on them to the lifeguard, getting him in trouble, and forced him to be her bitch boy for the rest of the day. F.U. DW. Arthur recalls the time DW beat him at checkers and bragged about it for an entire year. He claims that's not as annoying as Crazy Bus, an upbeat song written in A major that's played non-stop by A minor. It's the crack of dawn and DW is playing Crazy Bus for the 532nd time that week. And considering the song is a minute and a half long, that means she's been listening to the same song for a combined 13 hours and 18 minutes. Good God. DW is strutting around the house with her CD player at full volume, having apparently broken the headphones her brother gave her. Arthur tries playing outside to escape the noise, only to find DW and the Tibble-tumors screeching at full volume. Instead of telling their daughter to turn down the music, the Reed parents decide to ignore her. The Reed parents continue to fuel DW's manic obsession by taking the whole family to Crazy Bus Live. Arthur's worried he'll get recognized and disguises himself as an elephant, which may or may not be a hate crime. Arthur is surprised to see Buster at the show, because there's nothing more absurd than something made for kids appealing to a mass audience. Arthur reaches his breaking point and threatens to destroy DW's CD. DW tattles to her parents, getting her brother grounded. The music has finally stopped, only to be immediately replaced with DW's high-pitched shrills. Her Crazy Bus CD is missing. Dun dun dun. Through second nature, DW blames Arthur.
Yeah, like you didn't take my snowball out of the freezer. Let's not start that again.
Later that week, the Reed parents go to their high school reunion, leaving Catherine Frensky in charge. The second her parents are out of the house, DW begins terrorizing her brother. She mistakes his CD-ROM game for her Crazy Bus CD and nearly scratches it to pieces. DW refuses to let Arthur out of her sight and tears his room apart trying to find her CD. Instead of sending the kids to their rooms, Catherine has the brilliant idea of drawing a line down the middle of the house, which has worked great in every other show ever made. Catherine's plan instantly falls apart when the kids get into a tug-of-war over Arthur's jacket, which results in Arthur getting yeeted into the closet. Surprise, surprise, it turns out the Reed parents took the CD by mistake, even though there's no way they could have accidentally swapped CDs without DW noticing. DW pretends to take the moral high ground while never apologizing to Arthur for falsely accusing him. In a cruel twist of fate, DW doesn't even want the CD anymore. Her focus shifts to her new VHS copy of Crazy Bus the movie, which seems like it's meant to be enjoyed by people who are high as a plane or balloony. Arthur screams in terror as the hellish cycle repeats itself. God help him when the movie comes out on streaming. Let's review. DW became obsessed with an inanimate object, driving her brother insane. When the object went missing, she instantly blamed Arthur and destroyed his room trying to find it. She wasted all her time stalking and harassing her brother when it ended up being her father's fault the thing went missing in the first place. And even after the issue was resolved, she replaced her obsession with something even more obnoxious, ensuring her family never gets a moment's peace. F.U. DW. Arthur says the only two people more annoying than DW are the Tibble-twits. The terrible twosome excel at giving DW an inferiority complex the size of Canadian Oklahoma. The Tibble-tumors set up a deadly tiger trap in their front yard. Makes you wonder what happened to their parents. They're disappointed when Principal Haney falls into the trap instead. So wait, tigers are animals, but bears are people? How does this world work?
It's best not to think about it.
Mrs. Reed volunteers to watch over the Tibbletaints while their grandma is out, by which I mean she volunteers DW to watch over them. DW tries to get the Tibbletots to play peacefully, only to have them destroy her favorite coloring book. Doesn't feel so good when it happens to you, does it? DW begs Arthur to help her watch over the Tibble Tyrants, since he's babysat for them before.
Yeah, I told him a story.
Mrs. Reed doesn't do a goddamn thing while her house is torn to shreds. DW offers to read them a story. The Tibble-tools call BS, as even they don't know how to read yet.
No way, no way, no way, no way!
The fuck? The Tibble toilets call her bluff and ask her to read a picture book for them, cause no 4-year-old could possibly recite Little Red Riding Hood from memory. DW digs herself into a deeper hole by picking a book with no pictures, which I think we can all agree are the dumbest kinds of books. She starts her story in the middle of the book, where all stories start. DW spends the next hour verbally stroking her own ego by rewriting her own personal history, to make herself the hero of every terrible situation she's brought upon herself. Her thinly veiled self-insert goes on an adventure where she must rescue her Snowball from her evil brother, who's also a Transformer, which is somehow a bad thing? DW paints herself as the greatest thing that happened to humanity since sliced fucking Wonder Bread.
She can ride a no-wheeler!
So, a boat? Her story goes further off the rails as BW steals her aunt's wedding ring to cure her parents' spinach poisoning. Unfortunately, she first needs to find her missing blankie in the Maze Mart to activate the ring's power. Joe Fallon, what were you smoking when you wrote this episode? BW manages to escape the maze after finding her Snowball. Whoop-de-fucking-do. She also finds her blankie inside Crazy Bus, even though it's a completely different color. Surprise, surprise, it turns out to be a trap set by Arthur and Buster. Luckily, Spanky the Eagle shows up to kick ass and take names. Arthur is defeated thanks to his own self-destruct button and Spanky dies like a bitch. BW gives Spanky a proper send-off with the help of President Hank Hill.
Spanky was the bravest, boldest, best bird. America, fuck yeah.
The Tibbleturds are moved to tears as their grandma returns from the store. They decide to take the book with them so their grandma can finish reading it. When Arthur points out DW's ruse will be exposed, she admits she doesn't care as she only wanted to be superior for one afternoon. Short-term games for a pint-sized pain. Lucky for DW, the dynamic dimwits assume the book magically changed on its own, proving the only ones dumber than DW are the Look, there's only so many words that start with T. Let's review. DW became hell-bent on proving she was better than the Tibble twins, despite her inability to read, ride a bike, or tell time. When the Tibbles destroyed their own yard trying to kill someone, DW dreaded the idea of having to spend a whole hour with them indoors. The role of babysitter was foisted upon her by her mother, which she was woefully unprepared for. She lost her mind after only a few minutes because no one should ever be forced to spend time with children. She lied about being able to read to one-up her supposed friends, and made up a whole story which only served to stroke her ego. When Arthur pointed out she couldn't keep up the ruse forever, DW admitted she only cared about making herself look good in the moment. And as bad as the Tibbles might be, keep in mind their bad behavior is a partial byproduct of being raised by a single grandparent, who is clearly an overwhelmed pushover. What's DW's excuse? F you, DW. And I say, DW's preschool class is making paper bag masks, which I can only assume are in preparation for the upcoming ritual sacrifice. Miss Morgan tells them they will soon have their first fire drill, triggering DW's pyromania. DW's Inferno boner quickly deflates when she learns what a fire drill actually is. Miss Morgan leads the class through a series of exercises in preparation for the drill. For example, if you catch fire, your first thought should be stop, drop, and roll, instead of, holy shit, I'm on fire. DW is now scared of fire, and, as usual, makes it everyone else's problem. She sets off the smoke alarms in her house in the middle of the night. She also sets off Arthur's BS alarm when she pretends to be sick the next morning. Being the mother of the year, Mrs. Reed allows DW to stay home from school. When Arthur tries to pull the same stunt, Mrs. Reed tells him tough shit. Turns out, she wasted the whole day for nothing as the Tibbletwerps confirm the fire drill isn't for several more days. Mrs. Reed finally sees through her daughter's lies and forces DW to go to school the next day. She tells DW fire drills are important, which is a sentence she'll come to regret later in the episode.
There she goes, the best mother I ever had.
That's sad, but not for the reason you think. DW refuses to go inside, while Miss Morgan explains how a wet towel can be used to protect yourself from flames. Quick question, where the hell am I supposed to get a wet towel if the building is on fire? The Reed parents discuss how to help DW get over her fear of fire, while Mr. Reed eats a cookie straight out of the oven, like a masochist. The Reeds decide to make DW the fire warden of the house, because giving a person jurisdiction over something they're confused and afraid about is always the best course of action. DW runs her family ragged with her unending fire drills. She even goes as far as wearing her brother's used bath towel as a protective cover. Gross! Arthur tries to comfort his sister by talking about his first fire drill, only to be coldly rebuffed by the fascist 4-year-old. The next day at preschool, DW spends the whole time watching the clock.
Boy, I sure wish I could tell time.
I think I just found the best joke in the whole show. The fire alarm goes off and the Tibble trash instantly lose their shit. Ironically, DW keeps a level head and helps lead her class outside. The fire drill is over and DW is pissed off it wasn't more dangerous. She interrupts Tommy's panic attack to demand a more dangerous drill. Though to be honest, if this episode was made today, it would probably be about a school shooter drill.
That's not funny. That's super sad.
When DW gets home, she gaslights her family by claiming the fire drill was never a big deal to begin with, proving to be a massive waste of time and effort on her family's behalf. Let's review. DW lost her goddamn mind when she thought her preschool might spontaneously burst into flames. She went as far as pretending to be sick and even refused to go inside the building just to avoid the drill. She set off all the fire alarms in the house in the middle of the night, with no concern for her family's rest or well-being. When the Reeds tried to help her get over her fears, DW rewarded their sympathy with non-stop fire drills and blatant apathy. And even after she successfully navigated her first fire drill, she played it off as underwhelming and demanded a challenge that might actually put her peers in danger. F.U. DW. Arthur says DW refuses to have fun with her family unless she gets to pick the activity. The Reed family is planning their next big trip when Arthur suggests they go to Washington, D.C.
That's a capital idea.
For some reason, that joke hits differently now. DW wants to go to Ponyland, which looks like Dollywood on acid. Arthur points out DW got to pick their last vacation to a Santa-themed tourist trap.
How can you share a sundae with Santa if you don't bring a sundae to Santa?
The Reed parents should have done the bare minimum research on this place before driving all the way there. DW is outvoted and makes it abundantly clear she is not happy about it.
I don't care about the president. I care about ponies.
I'll give her this. At least she has her priorities in order. DW reluctantly agrees to go on the trip, like she has a choice, after her dad agrees to let her pick the next vacation. That doesn't stop her from trying to guilt-trip him into buying her a pony. DW spends the entire car ride being passive-aggressive as fuck, by pointing out every single pony she sees. Arthur fantasizes about meeting the president and becoming best friends. Who cares? DW spends the whole trip bitching and moaning about the lack of ponies and how boring everything is. And as someone who's been guilty of being that guy on a vacation, I assure you whining about every little inconvenience just further incentivizes your family to leave you behind. The Reed family decides to take a tour of the White House. DW says fuck that, sneaks off on her own, and ends up getting locked out of the tour. DW is now missing, and the White House is on full lockdown. Arthur worries what might happen if DW runs into the president.
It is now illegal not to own a pony, and the national anthem has been changed to Crazy Bus.
Nowadays, this would be the most realistic part of the episode. The Reed parents ask security to help them find DW.
That's it? Initials? You didn't give the kid a whole name?
Best character ever. DW bumps into the president and the two bond over their love of horses. DW is reunited with her family before she can do any real damage to democracy. The president invites the Reed family to dinner and Arthur spends the whole time kissing his ass. On the ride home, DW says she wants to be president when she grows up, which honestly may or may not be an improvement over the current situation. Let's review. DW chewed out her family when they wouldn't let her pick their family vacation. She spent the whole trip complaining about every little thing, wearing down her family's nerves. She snuck off during the middle of a tour, sending the White House into full lockdown. It was only when she finally got to see something pony-related that she stopped being a passive-aggressive prick. And even after everything worked out in her favor, she vowed to become the next president, threatening to reshape the country in her own image. God help us all. F.U. DW. And I say, hey.
It's a typical Monday morning in the Reed house. DW is making a mess and screaming at the top of her lungs, while Mr. and Mrs. Reed do jack-diddly squat to calm her down. Turns out, DW is all wound up because the circus is coming to town, which I'm pretty sure no kid born after 2010 would give a hot flying crap about. At school, Muffy perfects her counterfeiting skills while Binky stabs his easel to death. Arthur fever dreams his painting turning into an elephant, but that's what happens when you take the brown acid. Arthur gets sent to the school nurse, where his friends all skip class to check on him.
Did you throw up yet?
Buster, you are my spirit animal. Back at home, Arthur continues to get sick when DW comes in to make things worse. She tells him to quit faking, right before stealing his crackers and making a huge mess. DW complains how Arthur gets to eat dinner on the couch while she has to eat dinner at the table.
Ugh, spinach!
Dear God, not again. That night, Arthur has a nightmare where DW forces him to cross a tightrope on a unicycle and wakes up to find he has chickenpox. The Reed parents tell Arthur he can't go to the circus anymore, and DW is fucking psyched.
Don't worry, I'll take good care of you.
DW takes it upon herself to be Arthur's personal nurse Ratchet and forcefully takes his temperature. Thankfully, Grandma Thora shows up to save Arthur from DW's malpractice, so the tyrannical toddler resorts to verbal attacks.
If you're a good little boy and don't scratch, I'll bring you a balloon from the circus.
What a bitch.
Over the next few days, Grandma Thora takes care of Arthur while DW refuses to let him out of her sight. Oh, god damn it! DW snitches to Grandma Thora, who prepares Arthur a lunch that looks amazing to an 8-year-old and terrible to anyone with IBS. DW grows more and more jealous of the attention Grandma Thora is giving to Arthur, whose chickenpox have gotten so bad it's even spread to the furniture. DW is tired of playing by proxy and decides to go full Munchausen. She gives herself fake chickenpox and tricks her grandma into giving her an oatmeal bath. Her plan immediately backfires as she somehow doesn't understand what happens to magic marker in soapy water. Grandma Thora catches on to DW's lie and gives her the scolding her parents would never have the balls to deliver. That night, DW complains to her dad that she'd rather have the chickenpox than go to the circus. Instead of explaining how chickenpox make you feel horrible and that getting gifts and special privileges are only a minor silver lining compared to the constant pain of being sick, Mr. Reed tells DW to get over herself. He gives her the option of staying home from the circus, which is maybe the first smart thing he's ever done as a father. It's the morning of the circus, and Arthur's chickenpox have healed enough that he can go. Meanwhile, hell has apparently frozen over as DW apologizes to her parents and admits she was acting out because she was jealous of her brother. DW's sudden maturity and character growth are thrown out the window harder than Arthur's plane when she finds out she's now sick, which makes sense seeing how the Reed parents did absolutely nothing to safeguard their 4-year-old from her highly contagious brother. And unlike the book, where DW's chickenpox serve a karmic justice allowing Arthur to throw his sister's words back in her face, cartoon DW couldn't be more thrilled. When Arthur points out she won't get to go to the circus, she still claims to have won the day, as chickenpox only come once in a lifetime. But being a whiny little brat lasts forever. Let's review. DW accused Arthur of faking his illness and made a fuss when he got special sick day privileges. She attempted to play doctor with her bedridden brother and refused to leave him alone. Her green-eyed monster got the better of her when Grandma Thora paid more attention to Arthur, who was actually sick and therefore needed more help. She pretended to be sick to trick her grandma into doting on her and was only punished with a slap on the wrist. And even when she finally admitted her mistake and apologized for her actions, showing maturity for the first time in her life, she immediately reverted to her old ways once she got her own case of chickenpox. Because the status quo is God, and DW can never, never, never be allowed to grow up, figuratively or literally. F you, DW.
And I say, hey!
Emily is back from her trip to Paris, and DW couldn't give a single solitary crap. Emily admits she got her first kiss from a French boy named Pierre, and feels like she's been turned into a princess. DW is green with envy and vows to find her own Prince Charming. Emily tells her, good luck, ho. DW is plotting to get her first kiss when the Tibble twerps find her talking to herself and mistakenly believe she plans to kiss one of them. The dynamic dipshits rightfully crap their pants at the thought of being kissed by the prepubescent bride of Satan.
You could kiss one of them.
Yeah, good one.
It's not like bakers can be choosers. The next day at preschool, the class is voting on what song to put on for nap time. Emily suggests a French lullaby, while DW suggests Mary Moo Cow.
'cause bitches be basic. James ends up being the deciding vote and reluctantly sides with DW, proving democracy doesn't work. DW sets her sights on the poor young cuck and brags to Emily that she plans to kiss James. Emily tells her it doesn't count if she kisses James, which is a stupid fucking rule, and warns it could backfire horribly. DW imagines kissing James and accidentally turning each other into frogs forever, which is a fate worse than death. DW goes to Arthur for kissing advice, which is apparently a thing siblings do. DW finds his copy of Romeo and Juliet, and for a guy who loves reading, Arthur is terrible at giving plot synopses.
There's this boy named Romeo and this girl named Juliet, and their parents don't like each other, but they fall in love anyway, and plan to run away together. But there's a misunderstanding, and it all ends badly. The end.
He left out some important information, but that is the gist of it.
DW chooses to reenact a scene from Romeo and Juliet to get her kiss. Nope, I wish. She wears a disguise to preschool and tries to catfish James into locking lips.
I am, Nora.
Look, I'm not here to speculate about the sexuality of 4-year-olds, but if DW honestly thinks wearing a mustache and speaking with a deeper voice will convince James to kiss her, she might be barking up the wrong tree. DW then proceeds to put herself in danger in hopes James will rescue and kiss her. Her plan backfires miserably, leaving her flat on her ass. DW next resorts to paternity fraud before breaking down and aggressively demanding a kiss from James. Backed into a corner, James reluctantly kisses her and somehow avoids bursting into flames. Emily congratulates DW on her coerced cheek peck, explaining that Pierre only kissed her on the hand, which doesn't fucking count. DW laments the kiss didn't make her feel like a princess, shocker, and says she'd rather do cannonballs with the Tibblewits, which is an innocent enough phrase until you go typing shit into Urban Dictionary. The Tibble testicles run in horror from Dora Weinstein as she runs after them like a ravenous predator. Let's review. DW became hell-bent on getting a kiss from a boy she barely knew. Not because she liked him, but because she wanted to feel like a princess and one-up her supposed best friend. She pestered her older brother to teach her about kissing, which is a sentence that has no business being part of a kid's show. She based her actions on an overrated play about young love, not true love, and tried to trick James into kissing her through catfishing, gaslighting, and deceit. When all her plans blew up in her face, she resorted to screaming at James in front of her peers, forcing him to kiss her against his will. And even after she got exactly what she wanted, she complained the kiss didn't make her feel special, and reverted to hanging out with her friends who now fear she might do the same thing to them. Sadly, this wouldn't be the last time DW used James as a pawn in her feeble quest for romance, because even if you're only 4 years old, it's important to understand that consent is a two-way street, and nobody owes you their affection just because you were dumb enough to catch feelings for the first boy who was nice to you in your entire life. F-U-D-W.
And I say,
The episode opens with DW complaining how she isn't the central focus of a show named after her older brother. We're then treated to a fantasy sequence about losing teeth. Leave it to an educational cartoon to make teeth look scary as hell. DW is watching a My Little Pony commercial for horse clothes, which sounds dumb until you remember all animals wear clothes in this world. DW asks her mom if she can save up her allowance to buy the clothes herself. Mrs. Reed tells her, fat chance. Arthur has lost another tooth and DW's insults are locked and loaded, until she learns about the Tooth Fairy. Arthur explains how the Tooth Fairy flies around the world collecting children's teeth in exchange for cash, which even DW thinks sounds pretty sus.
Where does she get all the money?
Mental note, the girl knows too much.
DW realizes she can make money with her mouth and sets about pulling out her teeth. She tries to get Pal to do her dirty work, only to be scolded by Arthur, who would probably be fine with DW's scheme if the string was tied around her tongue. Arthur tells his parents about DW's masochistic behavior, causing Mr. Reed to choke on his water harder than Ratburn's Sweet D. DW flat out lies to her parents, demanding to get her tooth pulled. Mrs. Reed says she'll have to take her to the dentist. Mr. Reed says he can't go due to work, because getting piped by your son's grade school teacher is a full-time job.
Rats!
I can't tell if that's his pet name or his safe word. The next day, DW continues with her charade as she wastes her mother's and the doctor's time with an unnecessary dentist appointment. The dentist tells her teeth are fine, since most kids don't start losing teeth until they're 6. The Reed family next goes to the History Museum, which looks like it was put together by someone with an oral fixation.
Who the fuck are you?
DW gets the idea to use a fake tooth after recalling the time Arthur used a shark tooth to fool his friends into thinking he lost his baby teeth. Instead of using the shark tooth she already has, DW convinces her mom to buy her a new one. That night, DW brags to Arthur about how she plans to trick the Tooth Fairy. Arthur worries DW's scheme will piss off the Tooth Fairy and get their house blacklisted for life. And as much as I rag on DW, even I know Arthur's 8-year-old ridiculous ass is too old to still be believing in the Tooth Fairy. Next you're going to tell me he still believes in the Easter Bunny? Which, I guess in this world would just be a guy? Instead of telling his parents, or, doing nothing, Arthur uses his own money to make DW think her plan worked.
Ow! Why does DW have a bowling ball in her room?
You don't answer that.
The next morning, Arthur is perfecting his pimp limp when DW comes in to brag about her successful scam.
I tricked the Tooth Fairy! I tricked the Tooth Fairy!
Arthur is relieved until he realizes his dumbass left the fake tooth behind. So DW plans to do it all over again, cleaning Arthur out of house and home. Let's review. DW became obsessed with getting an overpriced toy she didn't need and decided to get the money through any means possible. Once she learned about the Tooth Fairy, she became hell-bent on pulling her own teeth, risking her health and safety. She wasted a doctor's valuable time with an unnecessary dentist appointment and complained when he wouldn't do whatever she wanted him to do. She coerced her mother into buying her a shark tooth, which she already owned, so she could scam the Tooth Fairy, and bragged to her brother about using it to make a quick buck. Which wouldn't have worked if her dumbass older brother still didn't believe in fairies. If Arthur had done absolutely nothing, DW's plan would have died on the vine and her ego would have been kept in check. But no. He had to play along and give DW exactly what she wanted, at both Arthur and Mrs. Reed's expense, 'cause she definitely spent more than $1 on that fake-ass shark tooth. Arthur inadvertently gave